1, 2, 3. This is Dr. Alex Avila with Love University, and we're back. I'm an author, speaker, and psychologist. Every week we talk about how to love ourselves, others, and higher nature, how to improve our life, our love, relationships, spirituality. And today we're at the Miami Book Fair. I can smell the Cuban coffee and all the nice food and the people here. It's a beautiful environment, the fans, readers, and we have a special guest today, Mr. Steve Almond, who is an American short story writer, essayist, author of 10 books, including the New York Times bestseller, Candy Freak, and Against Football. He's a former co-host of the popular podcast Dear Sugar with Cheryl Strayed. Welcome, Steve, to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Great. Now, you guys had a very popular column and podcast, Dear Sugar, Lost, Lonely, and Heartsick. Tell us a little bit about that. What did you do about that with the podcast?
So the podcast started as a column that I wrote, an advice column, and then Cheryl took it over and built a very big audience. And then we did this podcast because there was a real hunger for us. I guess we were an advice podcast, but mostly it was people writing about moments in their lives where they were in profound struggle.
Yes.
And probably fitting in with some of the work that you do on the podcast and also as a therapist. We tried to not give them advice so much as kind of be with them in that struggle, listen to what the story they were telling us, try to hear the story that's underneath the story that they're telling us, like a good therapist would do, and get them to forgive themselves and do what they need to do.
Interesting. Now, of course, Dear Abby was the classic. Are you guys the new Dear Abby of the Times, or how would you classify this approach?
Yeah, it was different than Dear Abby. The traditional advice column is like, I have a problem and I have come to you for the answer to the problem.
Exactly.
And that might work for some people. It's certainly helpful.
Yes.
Our approach was like, people would come to us with very profound and complicated struggles.
Yes.
And we wouldn't say, here's our advice. We would say, here's a story from my life where I think I might have been struggling in the same way as you.
Yes.
Or here's a book I love that speaks about the kind of struggle you're engaged in.
Yes.
And so we definitely give them some advice, but mostly to direct them to what they're telling us already in their letter. In other words, we don't sort of say, we're from on high handing you our wisdom. It's more like, you probably know what you need to do to get through this struggle. And if you don't know, we will certainly make you feel less alone in your struggle. And, it's hard to be a human. We don't have the answer. You shouldn't, do thus and such steps, because that might work for us, but it's not necessarily going to work for you.
It's interesting. You're a male and female perspective. I know you tackle some interesting issues. I'm in love with my abuser.
Yeah.
The other half of sexless relationships.
Yep.
And also, what would you tell your 20-year-old self as a 50-year-old person?
Yeah.
So what would you tell your 20-year-old self?
Right. Invest in Apple.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't eat too much.
The central thing is that people struggle to feel good about who they are and what they're doing. And at 20, I think you've got very little perspective on the fact that that struggle is going to stay with you, and it's not something that's your enemy. It's a natural part of what people struggle with in the human arrangement. And I would probably tell myself, read some books, because it took me to my late 20s to start reading and then become a writer.
Right.
But you know what? My 20-year-old self wouldn't listen to my 50-year-old self.
Okay.
So that's the trick.
They
trick. Always say, oh, well, what would you have done differently?
Yes, exactly.
Or I wish I'd done that, or I wish I'd done that. And it's like, well, if you go ahead and unpack it, you weren't ready to behave constructively and in a healthy way at that time in your life for particular reasons, and it'll probably take you a while to figure out what those reasons are.
Yes.
And you might want some company on that journey, and that's what Dear Sugars was.
Exactly. Yeah, I wrote a book, Invincible You, where I say that there's not really a reason to have regret, because if you're in second grade, you can't act as a college student. So you could not have acted any better anyways, or any higher. You're at the level of development. But the key is to learn from our mistakes, and also to help others learn from our mistakes. To be mentors, and that's a good idea. And I think that's part of the work you guys are doing with the Sugars.
Yeah.
Now, was there anything in that program that shocked you or surprised you, either any of the questions that were asked or any of the answers that were given?
Well, I think the main thing is to realize that most, the magnitude of letters we got, we're, pretty successful podcast eventually, lots of people were listening. We would get 15 to 20 letters. Oh, sometimes, God, there are days that we would get a dozen letters in a single day, all from people who were struggling their inner lives in profound ways. And it was this humbling experience to look through thousands of emails and realize how many people are in a profound state of struggle, dealing with loss, dealing with relationships blowing up,
Yes.
sorrow in their family, illness, whatever it is, and just the magnitude of people who are suffering.
Exactly. And you feel compassion for them?
Of course, and felt admiration for their ability to tell the story. In a sense, the best thing that we could do is simply to allow people to tell the story of their own lives.
Yes.
Whether we answered their letter or not, because we're only answering one in every 5,000 letters we're getting. But everybody's struggling with the same set of issues. I know what I need to do, but I'm worried about disrupting my life. I'm worried about change.
Exactly.
I think I deserve more, but I am not ready to ask for it. I'm in an abusive relationship in one way or another, but it's brought me a certain kind of safety or security, so I don't want to move out of it.
Exactly.
You know, these kind of bewildering situations. I want to avoid being in conflict, but somehow avoiding being in conflict is spring-loading the conflict and making it worse in my life. We saw these same things coming up over and
So you
over
have
and
a very
over.
psychological sophistication. You haven't been trained in psychology, apparently, education-wise.
No, my parents were psychoanalysts.
Oh,
though.
there you go. Okay, so you do have the osmosis kind of training.
And lots of therapy.
Personal therapy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And lots of reading.
Yeah, exactly. So internal work.
Yeah.
Now you have a very seem like a very passionate kind of guy in your writings.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this here, and I'm going to summarize this really simply, but you can maybe explain more.
Yeah.
From your books, it seems like you love candy.
Yeah.
You have a love and hate relationship with football.
Yeah.
And you love rock and roll.
Yeah, I mean, all those things are right. Everything that you, how to put it, when you love, like I write out of my obsession.
Yes.
Because I assume that those are the things I'm paying the most careful
Do you
attention
call it
to.
obsession or do you call it passion? Or do you find
I call
the
it
difference?
obsession. And the reason is there's a difference. I think passion is a positive association.
Yes.
You're drawn to something, it's healthy, it's good, it means you're alive. But obsession is really much more common feeling. For instance, I'm sure people who talk with you are struggling with being obsessed over the end of a relationship or a relationship that feels destructive.
Right.
And we would probably say when people are obsessed, they should move on, they should evolve, they should get over it, they shouldn't get stuck on it. But the truth is that people are naturally obsessive. And what happens is little kids are obsessed with everything. They're paying incredibly careful attention to whatever it is. They'll throw a tantrum if you try to take it away from them.
Right.
And as they get older...
Is that good or bad, though? I mean,
Well,
a genius can be obsessed, right?
What I would say is that it is.
Yes.
That's how human beings are. It's the natural default way that human beings operate. We're obsessive. And it's socialized out of us, which causes us to push our obsessions down, but it doesn't make them disappear. It actually, like conflict, it spring-loads them.
Yes.
So we end up kind of being in the closet. So I was in the closet as a candy freak. I was in a closet as a football fan, or as a rock and roll, like an overweening rock fanboy.
Exactly.
And so when I write books, that's my chance to investigate. Well, what is that about?
Exactly. Wait a minute, Steve. You're a very skinny guy. How can you love candy?
Yeah.
Are you really that? Are you really a candy lover? Or
I am.
Really?
I am. And
How do you pull it off?
I have the fillings to prove it.
Okay. Metabolism.
Well, lots of anxiety and with occasional bouts of depression. That'll help keep the pounds off.
Okay.
But even candy is not like, oh, it's just some pleasure that I feel that I love to eat.
Yes.
It was an antidepressant for me.
Okay.
It was a path away from despair.
Right.
That's what people seek out, is some sort of salve for their suffering. And it isn't always healthy. It usually isn't.
I see. So you went across the country on a tour of small candy companies, looking for the best candy in the world or something, or like chocolate candies, or
What I was trying to figure out is why certain candy bars survive and why other ones disappear.
right.
And what I found was that, like in the capitalist society that we live in, the big companies buy up the little ones or put them out of business.
Right.
And so I was trying to sort of find all the candy bars that used to exist in my youth, or that were regional candy bars that reflect how business used to be done in America like 50 or 100 years ago.
The old candy stores.
The old candy manufacturers, And it was something about discovering how kind of America has changed. We're all buying the same 3 brands of chocolate or beer or bread or fast food or clothing. So it's something about, it's called A Journey Through the Chocolate Underbelly of America, and I mean that it's kind of a travelogue book.
So you're talking about chocolate candy or the hard candy things?
Candy bars mostly.
Okay.
But I'll eat anything.
Is it?
It's like there's a bunch of candies.
By the way, so anyone got candy bar for Steve here?
Yeah, right.
Would you eat it if I gave it to you now or no?
Well, I might.
Are you in recovery?
No, I'm not in recovery. I'm still fully addicted.
Okay.
But when I'm looking at something that I'm passionate about, what I'm trying to figure out is what problem is it trying to solve?
Right.
It's basically, here's the way to say it. I was a candy addict. I was a football addict. And people don't become addicts because they want to mess up their lives. Maybe subconsciously they do.
Right.
They want to end pain and struggle. They want an escape from things that feel unbearable. So that's the way I look at these things that I love, is that they arise because I'm struggling in some way.
But you know, Glasser, the psychologist, talked about positive addiction. I mean, you can be addicted to jogging, to being in nature, to doing creative things.
Right.
So, I mean, the same kind of endorphins may have been released.
Yep.
So, can you redirect your energy to a higher positive habit? For example, writing.
Yeah.
Or maybe helping people.
Yeah.
That could be maybe a solution.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, if people can do that, that's great. My basic feeling is that they have to confront whatever darkness, whatever internal conflict they're engaged in before they can move forward.
Right.
And for me, maybe these books are a way of saying, well, I still love candy, but I have a little bit less kind of addictive attitude towards it.
Exactly.
I understand, or at least I better understand that when I use it, I'm using it as an antidepressant.
Okay.
And it's probably not going to solve the underlying depression.
Exactly. Now, in terms of football, now you said that you love it, but you hate it because you say it's a corporatized form of simulated combat. Now, the positive side of football, you could say, is vicarious. You identify with the community. You can make friends. Everyone's wearing the same shirt. So it's like a relationship building kind of thing. Hey, you're a Packers fan, whatever, and so forth. What is the negative side of it besides the violence?
Well, oh boy. So it's great if you're a Packers fan.
Yes.
But there's only so many Packers fans.
Right.
And the way that football kind of weaponizes tribalism. Because it's great if you're a Packers fan, but most people aren't. And there's a lot of Chicago Bears fans and a lot of Detroit Lions fans.
Right.
And you have the idea somehow that in order for you to feel like a winner, somebody else has to be a loser. And that is part of the American illness right now. It is not about collectivism. You're talking about within the tribe. But that's actually a kind of tribal loyalty that, in my opinion, is screwing everything up. Because it is actually about saying only these people matter, who are wearing the same jerseys, same gender, same color, same culture, same religion, and the other people actually don't.
Is it that extreme? I mean, I just watch it for fun, it's entertainment, And,
maybe not for you,
okay.
but for lots of people it is.
Really? Okay. Were you that way? Who was your team? The Giants?
The Raiders, the Oakland Raiders.
Oh, okay.
But the point is that it trains you in a way of thinking by which there's no way that we both can win.
Oh, okay.
If you're wearing a Packers jersey, you need somebody else to lose in order to feel like a winner.
Right.
And that I don't think is healthy.
That's not good, But if you just do it for fun, like you play some sports, that's not bad.
Playing is great.
Exercise.
Playing is great, but what we're talking about is consuming it.
Right. But even watching it, if you watch it for fun, that could be okay.
Well, here's the problem. Of course it can, and I loved the book Against Football as a reluctant manifesto.
Yes.
I watch football. I think it's the most amazing, exciting game.
I'm a basketball guy, so...
Yeah, but here's the deal. When you're a fan, you're actually a sponsor of the game. So if the game is violent, if the game has the gender values of the 1500s, if it asks you to suppress your empathy, if it results in the players getting brain damage, then you as a fan are sponsoring that. And we've erected this idea where, they're well paid, they're not our moral responsibility. But in fact, they're well paid because we watch.
How did the NFL take your book?
They did not like it.
No, I would imagine.
Yeah. And the other thing to think about is, if I say to you, I don't know how much of a fan you are, but if I say University of Michigan or University of Alabama,
we have someone over here who's an Alabama fan.
Right.
So.
Okay.
They're crazy about their team.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
But here's what University of Alabama is.
Yeah.
It's a university.
Right.
So if I say University of Alabama, probably you should think about a classroom or a lab or somebody who's going to become a lawyer or an electrician or a nurse or whatever it is. And if you're thinking about a football team, that means we've turned our educational system into an entertainment venue.
And so you're a big thinker. You kind of think outside the box. You kind of think of the bigger picture.
Yeah, well, what I try to do is question my own obsessions. So like football is pretty morally complicated, like anything else that we love when you check under the hood.
Exactly.
And football in particular is kind of crazy.
Now, this last book, I think, is called William Stoner and the Battle for the Inner Life.
Right.
Now, this is something like a book that was already published.
It just got published.
It was an earlier book.
Yes, Stoner is a novel from 1965. For the Inner Life is not a rewrite of that novel. It's a novel that was published in 1965. It's what I learned from reading it.
Yes.
Because the novels, your favorite books are always, I call them manuals for living. They're trying to teach you about your inner life. The work that you do is devoted to the inner life. And the basic idea of the book is that there's sort of a category error that people are making now in America, and maybe always, but especially now in America, which is they think their job is to get attention from the world, when in fact their job is to pay attention to their own lives.
Yes.
And when they don't, as you know from your work
Yes.
on the podcast and in your therapy, I'm sure your practice, when people turn away from their inner lives,
Yes.
they start making terrible, destructive decisions.
Yes, exactly.
Right? And they become very good consumers because they think products will save them
Right.
or make them feel better.
Exactly.
But
Candy, for example.
Candy, for example, or football, right? And so what I'm arguing in the book is basically that if we turn away from ourselves, we become susceptible to ad men and demagogues who can kind of turn us against one another. And that's what's happening today,
Very
unfortunately.
fascinating. We'd love to see more about that, and it's wonderful to have you on the show.
Sure.
Stephen. Where can people hear more about your, do you have a website, do you have books?
Sure,
I think
yeah.
you do.
Yeah, so I'm at stevealmond.org, just Steve Almond, just like the nut.org. Steve Almond Joy, sorry. stevealmondjoy.org.
Oh, so that's where I got joy.
Yeah, that's where you got it from. stevealmondjoy.org is the website. It has the podcast and the books and all that stuff.
Okay, fantastic. Well, Steve, it's been a pleasure. We'd love to have you on again.
All right, thanks.
Wonderful day. Enjoy the candy and the football.
I will, thanks.
Okay.
Take care.
Sounds great. So, Love University students, if you have any questions, you can email us at loveuniversitylove@gmail.com, 310-226-8090. Visit us at loveuniversity.love. Like us on Facebook at Love University Podcast. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Love_U Podcast. Until next time, Love University students, put away your notepads, your books, your iPads, and this is Dr. Alex Avila.